I'm here. I'm not getting any audio though.
Can you hear us?
Yes, now I can now.
Okay.
Oh, goody.
Say something else,
76.
Nate.
Yeah,
I'm
another
here.
sound
I'm
test.
not getting any audio though.
Who's that?
That's Fletcher.
Can you hear us?
No.
Yes, now I can now.
Oh, no, that's the, hold on, I gotta,
That might be Steve off.
no, it's the feedback.
Oh.
I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
I hear you guys fine.
Let's see, it's coming through that.
Oh, Betty.
Say something else, Nate.
Yeah,
I'm here. I'm not getting any audio though.
Yeah, I gotta.
They have to have a physical form present in order to have people on.
Muted them.
You have to have a physical form present in order to have people.
All right, let's try that again and make sure we don't have any feedback. Can you guys hear me on the other end?
Yeah, you sound much smoother. This is Steve L. Thank you.
Much smoother.
Yes.
All right, try it now. Can one of you guys speak for me again?
Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3.
I can hear him. It's okay, don't stress over it. I don't know.
They all say that they're in there, but some people don't have their cameras on.
That's okay. Okay. The camera's on.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Ready to go?
Yep.
Okay, all right, sorry for the delay. I will now call to order for the town council, the special joint meeting with the Pony Beach Planning Commission, Thursday, December 16th, 2021 at 5:37 p.m. Roll call of town council, all members are present.
Okay, I will now call to order the planning commission, December 16th, 5:30 p.m. And members present is Maureen McKay, and then Tree Mack and Bob Christensen, myself, Victoria Luna, and joining us electronically is Steve Ale and Nathan Hale. And I understand, Steve, I'll start with you, that we have to ask physically where you are and why you're not here physically at the meeting tonight.
I am in Atlee, Virginia, just north of Richmond in a Sheetz parking lot. I'm here because I had to take my dog to a neurologist today because her front legs aren't working. But so heading back to Columbia Beach, but didn't want to do the call while I was driving, so I pulled over.
Well, thank you for being here under that emergency condition. And then Nathan Hale, where are you and why are you joining us electronically?
I'm in Gainesville, Florida, and I am tending to an ailing family member.
All right, and Fletcher Lee is absent tonight.
All right, I would like to make a motion to amend our agenda to vote on a reappointment of a planning commissioner. The term expired in November for Mr. Bob Christensen, and so we'd like to amend the agenda to vote on the reappointment. Do I have a motion to amend the agenda?
So moved.
Any second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Would you like to make a recommendation?
Yes, well, I'd like to start out by recognizing Maureen McCabe, who this is her last meeting on the commission, and she has served for almost 10 years. And we appreciate your service so much, Maureen. We have a gift for you, and I'd like to have Tree present that tonight. And thank you so much, Maureen. Thank you. The Planning Commission would like to reappoint Bob Christensen, and he has served on the commission now for at least 4 years, and his term expired last month, and it caught us off guard. We weren't aware of that. He has submitted his application more than I guess 2 weeks ago or so, and so I'd like to hear a consideration of that. Do we need to vote on that? Okay. Is there a motion
So moved.
and a second? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Okay,
Aye.
so that, congratulations, Mr. Christensen. That was unanimous.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so now council has to vote on the recommendation of the planning commission for the reappointment of Mr. Christensen.
Could I ask the details on the reappointment? What's the term? What's the new expiration date?
Sure, it's a 4-year term. The term was a November term expiration date, and so it will continue in that way unless the planning commission changes their bylaws to set terms to a normalized standard. So that may be something they should consider doing, so we don't run into the issue at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the recommendation of the planning commission?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We have full quorum and everybody here except Fletcher, which I will give him a hard time about. Next time he has to take us on a cruise too. All right, with that, we will open the joint public hearing for the conditional use permit 01-2021 Hawthorne Street. DDG Acquisitions LLC has applied for the conditional use permit for a mixed residential commercial use building located at 100 Hawthorne Street, 18 North Avenue, and 106 Hawthorne Street, Phase 2. The property is zoned resort commercial. Do we want to do a read into this before I open the public hearing? Do you want to do the public hearing first and then do the read in?
You want to do your staff recommendation, do your staff recommendation.
Oh, prior to the applicant, okay. Did you want me to go ahead and just do the staff report, the full presentation, or just a recommendation? Okay.
Just read in the
issue.
the
project.
issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you could summarize, that's what I think, is summarize, and then the applicant can present, and then you can follow up with your actual recommendation.
Well, the issue is the requested action, and I'll just go through it that way, is that the applicant is seeking to have an approval of a conditional use permit of to redevelop or renovate 2 buildings as mixed residential commercial uses on the tax map parcels 382-2-7512 and tax map parcel 382-2-75-12A. The applicant is seeking a mixed use approval of a CUP, a conditional use permit, and the proposal, or what they are requesting, the applicant is requesting, is the components of the mixed residential use would be they've defined as ground floor commercial and upper floor residential. Section 7.36 of the town zoning ordinance enumerates mixed residential commercial use buildings as uses requiring approval of a CUP, as opposed to uses that are permitted by right uses. Section 20-2 definitions of the zoning ordinance defines a mixed residential commercial use as a building which provides commercial office space together with one or more residential units. The any approval of a conditional use permit, there's certain principles associated with the key principles about approving a conditional use permit. I won't go to any great explanation about this, but two of the principal conditions to really have to deal with impacts and determining or making determinations about impacts potentially of conditional uses through and potentially mitigating those potential adverse conditions on the neighborhood and adjoining properties through identification of reasonable conditions. And that is one of the sort of basis by which these conditions, the basis for determination or identifying these conditions, it has to be a determination by the town council ultimately that these conditions do constitute something reasonable conditions is the language that should be applicable. Decisions by the governing body granting or either denying a special use or in this case a conditional use permit, those terms are used synonymously, are presumed correct and reviewed under the fairly debatable standard. So the courts historically have given deference to legislative bodies, whether they be town councils, city councils, or board of supervisors, with the presumption is that the conditions are reasonable and that deference is given or and reluctance by the courts to interfere with a legislative action. So the presumption is normally, usually is of course, is that the determination for approving or denying a conditional use permit is presumed, of course, to be correct by the legislative body. So, moving forward a little bit, I'll advance this a little bit more to try to expedite the matters. Requirements for the approval of conditional use permit are identified in section 16.5 of the zoning ordinance, and they are identified as three. The use will not affect adversely the health or safety of persons residing or working in the neighborhood of the proposed use and be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to property or improvements in the neighborhood and be in conflict with purposes of the comprehensive plan of the town of Colonial Beach. The staff of my analysis that the applicant has provided a narrative and the narrative and supporting documents requesting this conditional use permit. The proposed use, of course, is a use that is identified in the zoning ordinance. It is not merely contemplated, it is in fact identified in the enumerated a list of conditional uses for the resort commercial zoning district. That is, I've attached this staff report. You should have that information, and there's some other supporting documentation, the application from DDG LLC, and some mapping as well to identify an aerial image of the parcels of the properties, a zoning map to identify that indeed these parcels are in the resort commercial district. And the other mapping is the mapping for the future land use to identify that this particular use as requested is consistent with the what is identified in the town's comprehensive plan.
Okay, thank you. Next, I will open the public hearing at 5:48.
Mayor,
Yes.
I would like to propose, since we have, I think, 2 people signed up to speak and 1 email, that we allow up to 5 minutes instead of 3 minutes for public input per person.
Is that a motion?
If it needs to be.
Do I have a second?
I have a question. Does the commission vote on this as well, or is it just the council?
I think everybody does.
Yes.
Do I have a second to the motion? Okay, hearing none, the motion fails. Continue with the conditional use permit, public input, public hearing, which will open at 5:49 p.m. And I do have a couple people signed up. Mr. Fitzpatrick?
4 emails.
Oh, and I have 4 emails. Okay, thank you, sorry.
Good evening. Happy to be here tonight. I'm Michael Fitzpatrick. I live at 401 Ward Street, and I'm actually here speaking on behalf at the request of the Board of Directors of the Chamber of Commerce of Colonial Beach. After lengthy discussions and debate, the Chamber Board of Directors has decided to support and recommends approval by the Planning Commission and the Council for the Dotson Group conditional use permit pertaining to Phase 2 of his projects. That being said, we also wish to go on the record and express 2 concerns. The first relates to the process for the application. Without going into detail, the Chamber Board is convinced that the previous zoning administrator mishandled the application process, resulting in the impression that the town was not following protocols and was attempting to bypass proper procedures and keeping information from the public. We believe that this has been rectified, and now that things are in order, we're past that, but we recognize that there was an issue there, and we hope that that will not occur in the future. Secondly, and this is probably our bigger concern, relates to the change in use of the 3 buildings in Phase 2 from what was originally contracted as retail and commercial, now to a mix of residential and shared office space. We understand the financial drivers behind this, and we applaud the Dotson Group for their efforts over the past year and a half to try to obtain business renters of a retail or restaurant nature, but we understand the current market climate drivers are not allowing that to move forward. So in consideration, we think it is better for these buildings to be renovated than to sit there and further deteriorate. So although we would prefer it to be retail and restaurants, and as it was originally proposed, we're fine with proceeding as is in this mixed use. We do, however, recommend that the Council and Planning Commission consider putting a 3 to 5 year limit on the conditional use permit so that it could be considered down the road should the market conditions change and retail become a more viable option for those buildings. Not that it couldn't be renewed again and as it is in 3 or 5 years, but we would recommend that you at least take that into consideration before granting this CUP. Additionally, we ask that the Dotson Group take future retail use into consideration, and as they do these renovations, that the downstairs can easily be converted to retail space should that be the market conditions and at that time. And finally, we're pleased to read that Phase 3 has been modified to include parking and limits the number of residential units and will only be a 2-story building. And we look forward to working with the Dotson Group and seeing the outcome of all 4 phases of his projects. So that's the board.
Thank you.
Okay, and I just have one other thing to say. It's been a pleasure working with the Dotson Group from the Economic Development Committee standpoint. I love what I see going on so far with the townhouses, and I personally think that we should proceed. I think that we have worked very long and hard in this town to get a developer that's as committed as the Dotson Group is, and I look forward to hopefully seeing things through to fruition all the way through Phase 4 as a citizen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Was that timer for 3 minutes? Okay, so when somebody speaks for a group, they do get 5 minutes, okay? And then when somebody speaks individually, they get.
Well, darn, I could have said a lot more.
So you were good to go. That's why I let you keep going. Thank you very much, though. I just wanted to clarify that in case anybody, because, I'm generally pretty strict on the time, so. Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, and good evening. This is the second time in 2 nights I'm here before you, and I'm happy to be speaking in support of the conditional use permit that the Dodson Development Group is proposing. I am their agent, as everybody knows, for their residential units that they're building right now, and will be the condos that will be along the boardwalk. But I have spent a lot of time with the Dodson Group looking at all of the various stages and phases that they're going through. And I can tell you that they have tried extremely hard to bring retail into Hawthorne and onto North Irving. And if it was their preference would be to have retail and commercial use, or retail use for the ground floor, and possibly even for the second floor. The uses that they're proposing right now are not their first choice, but it is the reality that they're being confronted with. So, and I can guarantee, just by knowing them as well as I do, that they are going to, as soon as they possibly can, they will turn that space into retail as quickly as the market will allow them to do that. So I'm just speaking for myself tonight, but also as somebody who knows them quite well and respects them, I believe that their intentions are completely in the interest of this town, and I wholeheartedly support what they're doing with the conditional use permits. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in person that would like to speak? Because next I'm going to go to emails. Okay. Yeah, there's 30.
Yeah, I double checked an email that just came through and it wasn't.
Oh, okay.
This is old.
Okay.
Okay, so the first one I have is from downtown Colonial Beach.
Okay, you can use the microphone. Thanks.
The first one I have is from downtown Colonial Beach. They write, "To whom it may concern, downtown Colonial Beach appreciates the Dodson Group's investment in our town, their appreciation for historic buildings and what we believe are good intentions on their part. We do have some concerns about the requested conditional use permit, particularly the potential shift from active ongoing retail occupation to passive retail or residential use on the ground floor of centrally located buildings in downtown. The Main Street method, which both downtown Colonial Beach and we believe the town government support, favors active uses on the ground floor of downtown buildings, which prevents retail gaps and supports retail concentration in downtown areas. However, if the market cannot currently provide first floor retail, the risk of a developer pulling out likely outweigh the risk of this short-term setback to achieving that goal. If a majority are agreed that this is a necessary short-term step, then our preference would be for one, use of the property that would enable relatively smooth conversion to first floor retail until such time as the market can provide first floor retail. Short-term rentals as office space would seem to be consistent with that. Two, a limited time period for the CUP to be in place, requiring a reapplication after a period of 3 years, so as to enable the market to be reassessed for its ability to sustain first floor retail. Three, a good faith effort by the town or a nonprofit organization to participate in or facilitate a market analysis that would independently assess the feasibility of recruiting first floor retail for the affected properties. We also appreciate the moves that the Dodson Group have made with substantially reducing the number of condos along the riverfront, providing parking spaces that should mitigate the development's potential adverse impact on available parking, and reducing the height of the building to 2 stories. The riverfront is the crown jewel of Colonial Beach, and ensuring that a trade-off between residential and retail space is not too skewed towards the former is important. Finally, we have concerns about how the review of the multiple CUPs were handled by the prior zoning administrator. This is an issue as important for how applications have been handled as for their substance. It is vital for citizens to trust that the planning and zoning process will be handled consistent with the town zoning ordinance. Revitalizing the downtown will not be possible if people cannot trust the processes by which such impactful changes are reviewed by the government. As we understand, the documents provided by the Freedom of Information Act request indicated that the zoning administrator failed to ensure the applications adhered to several strict requirements for such an application and provided definitions and interpretations that did not adhere to reasonable standards. We trust that the acting zoning administrator has worked to bring the application into compliance with the requirements. Longer term, we would respectfully suggest the town government look at how zoning administration is structured and work to prevent this kind of problem in future by enabling stronger direct oversight of the administrator. It is difficult to be specific without better.
Get 5 things.
Yeah, I got a minute and 46. It is difficult to be specific without better line of sight into the process, but town management likely had some understanding of how oversight of the prior zoning administrator did not detect problems with the application process until FOIA requests were made. Our hope is this process can trigger improvements to ensure proper vetting of such requests further in advance of relevant hearings. It is in everyone's interest to rebuild and maintain the public's trust in the zoning process and ensure that a cooperative and structured relationship exists between the government and the interested parties. In the interest of full disclosure, I don't know if I can read this. On that last note, we have one final recommendation for the town government. Since the cause of the CUP request is, we trust, due to the market not currently supporting as much retail as many would have hoped, a longer-term effort regarding retail is needed. This controversy has clearly demonstrated how committed town economic organizations are to increasing retail in our downtown and commercial core. Town government could demonstrate a shared commitment to this goal by acting assertively to address the problem of empty buildings and storefronts downtown and on Colonial Avenue. We urge the town to research and report out on a specific issue affecting the potential retail market, specifically the impact of unoccupied buildings in its commercial core, then act upon best practices to alleviate the problem. The town government could further demonstrate its commitment to retail development by taking steps to actively support our new and existing businesses, reporting on measures taken at the monthly council meetings. Positive comments from existing businesses could be the strongest inducements to new retailers to locate here. This would start, but I'll put the whole thing in minutes.
And we had it in advance too.
Huh?
We had it in advance.
Yeah. The second one is from Relda Schick, 104 Azalea Road. She writes, I am in favor of the approval of the CUP for the Dotson Group for mixed residential commercial for 100 Hawthorne Street, 18 North Irving Avenue, and 106 Hawthorne Street. This is a positive move for the town in a blighted area that needs renovation. The Dotson Group has proved to be dependable, upfront, and already invested here. They understand what it takes for these buildings to be profitable. We are fortunate to have this opportunity to continue to work together. Thank you.
She never does that.
Preparing for the 5-page.
Okay, so if it's a group, 5 minutes, okay?
It's not, it's just a business.
Oh,
So it's 3 minutes.
okay.
Yeah, right?
His email said he was right on behalf of 2 people.
Multiple entities, it's 5.
So 5, we want to do 5?
I think it's safer. But it's multiple entities.
Yes.
Okay. My name is Robert Vaughn. I'm a co-owner of the Riverview Inn and of the Ferry Landing Pier. My businesses are the ones which would be most directly affected by the actions of the town with regard to the subject CUP applications, as the property is directly across the street from our hotel and a short distance from Ferry Landing Pier. Over the years, the town has consistently violated its own ordinances so as to achieve a result for the benefit or detriment of a select few. The actions of the town with regard to the Dotson development are a prime example. Despite the town subdivision ordinance stating in clear and unequivocal terms that no lot shall be sold or construction activity initiated until a final plat for the subdivision has been approved and reported. The town not only allowed, but encouraged and facilitated extensive construction activity and the sale of units on the old school property, phase 1, without any plat having been proposed, much less approved. The same is holding true with regard to phase 2. The following is a list of only some of the inconsistencies and violations with regard to the pending CUP application for phase 2. 1, the ordinance requires that the CUP application be made by the owner of the property or the owner's authorized agent. The owner of the property in question is the town itself. The applicant on the CUP application is DDG. This of course begs the bigger question. As the seller of the property, the town has an irreconcilable conflict. It is the owner of the property who wants the town to do whatever it takes to complete the sale, including granting the current request for a CUP, and at the same time is the entity who decides whether to grant the CUP itself. It's akin to the town being both the batter and the umpire calling balls and strikes. The ordinance has very specific requirements for what must be submitted to constitute a completed CUP application. The CUP application form for the town likewise has very specific requirements. The ordinance states in clear and unequivocal terms that no further action shall be taken on the application until it is complete. Even the most cursory review of the application that was submitted in October makes it clear that it was incomplete. Accordingly, no further action could be taken. It is also to be noted that the town revised its application on October 18, 2021, the day before the subject application, to ostensibly eliminate certain requirements of the application. Notwithstanding the incomplete application, town posted notices and published advertisements for a joint public hearing to consider the incomplete application, which the ordinance expressly prohibits, as required by the ordinance and as stated in the advertisements published by the town. Copies of the CUP application are to be on file with the town and available for inspection Monday through Friday between 8:30 and 4:30. As there were no completed CUP applications, the town misrepresented to the public both the existence and the availability of the same. As a direct result of my attempts to view the application, it was not until earlier this week that additional documentation was submitted by the applicant, not the town who is the owner. I have requested the exact date of the filing of the additional documents, but the town has declined to respond to that request. Virginia law and the ordinance required advertisement of the application for 2 successive weeks before any hearing on the application. With the last such ad running not less than 6 days before the hearing, as the notice and advertising cannot occur until the application is complete. Even if it was complete this week, the advertisement is insufficient and in violation of Virginia law. I also note that the town has attempted to utilize the absolute minimum amount of advertisement for this hearing, Friday, December 3rd and Friday, December 10th. The ordinance requires written mailed notice of the hearing to property owners across the street from the properties in question, and then an affidavit be filed confirming the mailing. No such mailing was done and no affidavit was filed. Accordingly, this meeting is in clear violation of the ordinance. Virginia Code Section 15.2-2204 allows joint hearings between the town council and the planning commission for very limited purposes. Consideration of a CUP application is not one of them. Perhaps more importantly, the town is choosing to ignore its contractual requirements, being the basis that the town represented to the public that it was selling town property at a very significant discount in the first instance. The contract states that phase 2 is to be developed as mixed office commercial. The town is brazenly violating the terms of its.
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
All right, that's all I have signed up. With that, I will close public comment at 6:07 p.m. We'll have a presentation from the applicant this time.
Just to make sure, Disler, Bill, and then is Preston on the phone as well, on Zoom as well, Preston Lloyd,
Everybody still with us online?
I have Brian Ditzler and James Hill.
but not Preston.
Nathan Howell's present.
Gotcha. Okay.
Steve Bell's here.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, thank you guys for having us. Do you mind getting the slide deck? I want to give just folks a visual, help people understand the progression of a neighborhood. So you can go to the next slide. So I just want to show people, not everybody's been inside these 3 buildings. This is upstairs in the Chamber of Commerce building. You can just see it's in various states of disrepair. The plaster's falling from the ceiling of the walls. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. That's the interior of the school board building. And then the next slide is the interior of the bank building, which has some really cool historic features, but you see years of leaks and the ceiling falling in and other things. You can go on to the next slide. So the downstairs of the bank building, we like to make Covey workspaces, which is a workspace, a shared workspace. So in this space, you can rent an office, you can rent a desk, you can work in the co-working area, pay a monthly fee, use all the services, including a conference room, printer, scanner, copier, fax, internet, coffee, etc. If you'll go down to the next slide. And I would like to state a couple of things. Number one, the co-working space is a commercial use, so it's a by right use downstairs. So I don't think we're here to argue that. The downstairs of the Chamber of Commerce building will be a commercial use. We're not arguing that. So all the CP is asking is, can the upstairs be residential? So per the letters from DCB and the Chamber, which we appreciate, we love those guys. We're not making the downstairs of those two buildings residential. We're not. So it's just the upstairs are making residential. What you're looking at here is a picture of, this is Broad Street in Richmond. This is the Scotts Addition neighborhood, a very heavy retail corridor. Scotts Addition is a very popular neighborhood now. Back in 2014, it was not. Back then, there was no retail demand in Scotts Addition. There weren't restaurants and other retail establishments trying to come to Scotts Addition. We bought this building, which you're seeing about a third of the building on the left that says gather, let's do this. So that is a co-working space. We started looking at 2014 and opened in 2016. And back then, the things that we could do back then in the neighborhood was residential apartments and a co-working space were the best things as developers that we could actually get accomplished, get done, get buildings renovated, get them open, get them looking pretty. We opened Gather in 2016. A year later, the building to the right, that building is it's a restaurant called Perch, a high-end seafood and South American restaurant that did not want to come there in 2014, 2015, 2016, but it did want to come there in 2017 as the market emerged. And then a year later in 2018, the building to the right, Bingo Beer Company, that's an old bingo hall that sat vacant and was in disrepair for 20 years. And in 2018, as the retail demand was emerging, they opened a brewery, restaurant, arcade. And if you go to the next slide. So that's the one interior shot of the co-working space. You can go down one more. That's another interior shot. So that's just the kitchen common area. And then behind it, you've got 80 offices that people rent individual offices. They get to share this common workspace. They get to meet each other, have coffee at lunch. They have a buddy to have lunch with. And it's a co-working space is a neighborhood community builder, neighborhood builder. You can go down one more. And so now in 2021, these are just some of the retail brands that are in Scotts Addition now, and they're clamoring to come there. Now, I'm not here to claim that Richmond is just like Colonial Beach. I'm not here to claim that Scotts Addition is just like downtown Colonial Beach. But I think those principles are still true, that when you have beautiful historic buildings that need love, let's find a way to get them renovated and get them pretty so they look good and people can use them, and retail demand will come when it comes. When that comes, we will capture that. The other comments I'd like to make, and we're good with the slide deck, so thank you. The other comments I'd like to make about the Chamber and downtown Colonial Beach's thoughts, a 3 to 5 year conditional use permit would be a non-starter for our lender and our investors, and it's probably pretty obvious why that would be a deal killer. Picture you're a bank, you lend us money to renovate a building. For 3 to 5 years, you have somebody paying rent, and then in 5 years, you're not allowed to be there anymore, and the building's worthless to the bank. So their collateral will be almost zero. So that's not a possibility that I've ever seen used a 3 to 5 year. But in fact, we wouldn't need that anyway because the downstairs will already be commercial, will be by right. Hope that makes sense. Did I say that right? He's the smart guy here. So we would like to respond to any questions or comments you guys have about the application. And again, we have on the phone, we have James Hill, who's our architect. We have Brian Ditzler, who's our civil engineer. And I thought Preston Lloyd, our land use attorney, was here, but that's fine. We can proceed without. So any questions we can answer?
Yes, I would like to ask about the parking. I understand that some parking space is going to be available for. Yeah, the rear of those 3 buildings, we have at least 6, maybe as many as 9 off-street spaces plus street parking, which I think, giving 1 or 2 per residential unit and a couple during the day for the commercial use would be more than enough, coupled with the street parking, especially on Irving. And I understand that there's possible to reserve some for phase 3. Yeah, so phase 3 in the current plan, we have to go through a conditional use permit before that is a real thing. Right. But in the current plan, we're gonna have between 40 and 45 parking spaces. So 8 to
12 of those will service the residential condos. The rest will be for retail use, customers and employees alike, and we'll have some golf cart parking in there. Most of that parking will be utilized at night because the retail will be restaurant, will be more heavily utilized on the nights and weekends. So Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, that lot will have a lot of capacity that we could use for this. But that being said, that's not here yet, so I don't think we should count that, but that is our plan.
And other questions by planning commission members?
I don't think my question is nearly so much for you as it is for the rest of us in the difficulty in the future. Let's say we don't do the 3 to 5 contingency on this, the difficulty to do a new request to change, I won't say the zoning, but like a new conditional use permit request, if they decide to change the upstairs into retail again, would it just be a process? Like
I
this?
understand from Mr. Shaw that they would have to go back forward and apply for another conditional use permit.
Right, but so if they decide to change the use of the space, they would simply have to do this again, do the same application process in order to change that.
I don't think that's true. I think
yeah,
that, let's ask Mr. Shaw, but I'm pretty sure commercial is
Yes,
by right
commercial.
in the zone.
Right.
And if they would like to change the entire building back to commercial, they can just do that.
Correct. See, and the only reason why I'm asking that is because it goes to the comment about a 3 to 5 year contingency on this being kind of deal killer for investment. Because if we don't need to put a 3 to 5 year on it in order for them to be able to change it back, then why would we do that? So otherwise, I think that's all the comment I have on.
Are there any other questions for the presenter before we do the staff report?
I would like to ask Mr. Dodson. I'm not quite understanding the 3 to 5 year restriction being a problem. I've leased commercial property myself in the past, and there's usually a 2 to 3 year term on it. How is that any different to the banks if they have a lease and it's only for 2 or 3 years?
So the difference is if a commercial tenant comes for 3 years and says, I'm leaving, we could try to lease it to another commercial tenant. We're not even, I think, just to make sure we're not confused, no one is trying to make the downstairs residential now or ever. But if we make the upstairs residential, and then in 3 to 5 years, you yank a conditional use permit away, my residential use upstairs is not permitted anymore. So then I have to convert to commercial, and the bank wouldn't like that. Like a lender would never give a loan if a use was only good for 3 to 5 years. Does that make sense?
That's more clear. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
sure.
Dr. Zolzano?
I noticed in the recommendation from the zoning administrator, he had recommended hours limited to 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. And in your application, you were requesting the downstairs commercial hours to be from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. Would you address that?
Yeah, do you have, I mean,
it's really just dependent on what we want the co-working space hours to be. And, we have coworkers that work that late. It's not a normal business operating hours, but we do have folks that come in and utilize the office late.
but I don't think an hour either way is gonna
Right.
move the needle. If it helps everyone to be within 10, I don't think
Right.
that's a big deal. Does that answer your question? Like, I think you make it as wide as you can for the future, so you're not restricting some use in the future you don't even know about. Like if a restaurant comes and they want to be open until 11, if that's legal, why wouldn't that be okay, I guess? Does that make sense?
That that addresses it to my satisfaction. See if anybody else has any further questions.
I was wondering if you had, for the shared market space, if you've done a market analysis to see how that would impact here in our community?
We have not done a formal market analysis. We've informally talked to folks that said they would like to use the space. We're going to be a member of the space. So like our team that works here will work out of they'll be one of the members of the co-working space. We have some other folks in town that have asked about renting an office. We have some other folks in town that will would like to be a co-worker and work in the shared space. I think I don't have any data to show you what that would do for the neighborhood 5 to 10 years from now, but I have seen the power of connection when people get together and they have a nice, warm, inviting space to get together. Good things happen. Ideas start, businesses start, and it's a good place to to meet your neighbor.
Also, looking at the shared office space, I understand that that's possible, that you could break that down at a fairly low cost, should retail opportunity come along in the future.
Correct, yeah, and the beauty of like us, we that tenant, the co-working space tenant will be us, controlled by us, and so it's a great tool to develop the next building that needs love. So if, call it 3 years from now, a restaurant says, I'd like to be in the bank building, we'd be happy to move that tenant, the co-working space, to another building that is there neglected, that needs to be renovated, and we can move it there. Anywhere within the downtown limits, it's an office space. So if you can walk to restaurants and bars and places to eat and drink and have coffee, it's a good place for a co-working space.
Any other further questions for the presenter before we move to staff report? Okay, we'll call you on you though if things come up.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes,
would you like to go over your staff recommendation?
yes, I would. The information I provided you previously leads into this recommendation, and I will address one of these about the operation hours.
Please speak into the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Excuse me, ma'am. Can you hear me now? Better? All right. Let's move on then. Staff supports the approval of case number CUP-01-2021. Staff finds that this project to be a reasonable use of the properties with minimal impacts to the adjacent development, and is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan and the future land use section specifically references these types of uses, and I'll just read it verbatim. The 2020-2030 comprehensive plan for the town of Colonial Beach and the future land use map specifically reference this as follows. This area encompasses all of the parcels along Washington Avenue, areas to the boardwalk, and a smaller section of Colonial Avenue. And this last section in particular is salient point. Mixed-use development with commercial and residential should preserve the historical integrity of the area. So this is something that is specifically referenced in the future land use for the historic resort commercial area. Therefore, one of the conditions, or one of the sort of the tests that need to be satisfied is what's being proposed something that is consistent with the town's comprehensive plan, and as I think that most people would recognize it, it's specifically identified in this fashion. So, having said that, with the appropriate conditions, the proposal should be harmonious with the existing character of the general vicinity. Should the planning commission or town council consider this application appropriate for approval, staff proposes the following conditions. And prior to these conditions that I'm reading, I just want to make both bodies aware of the planning commission and the town council that these are these are staff recommendations. It's certainly the prerogative of the planning commission and the town council to amend, delete, add conditions as they deem appropriate that are reasonable conditions for potentially addressing any sort of impacts upon adjoining properties and the neighborhood. So the conditional use permit and all conditions listed below is for the mixed residential commercial use of buildings located on tax map parcels 3822-7512. Also further identified as 100 Hawthorne Street /18 North Irving Avenue and 382-2-75-12A, further identified as 106 Hawthorne Street. This conditional use permit shall run to the land but may be revoked by the town of Colonial Beach or its designated agents for failure by the applicant or its assigned to comply with any of the listed conditions or any provision of local, state, or federal regulations as applicable. The hours of operation of the commercial uses of the building shall be from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. And the only reason, or the primary reason, rather, that I suggested just an hour earlier would be if, for example, the use may be and the ground floor may be generating noise and may have an impact upon the residents. I floor. Although 1 hour here or there probably doesn't make a whole lot of difference as far as impact is concerned. That's the only rationale that I really applied for that, because potentially it may have some potential minor impact upon the residents on the upper floor area. Having said that, it's certainly the prerogative to change it back to what the applicant is requesting. This is just something that I'm providing you, I think would be have some merit. Three, a separate entrance from upper floor residential uses shall be provided in each building, and 4, external illumination on the parcel shall be shielded to direct light and glare onto their premises, and lighting and glare shall be deflected, shaded, and focused away from all adjoining properties. Any instances where conditions are applied, and a number of instances are frequently the conditions really are, for the most part, are by and large to address issues associated with noise, fumes, glare, fire hazards, traffic, those types of things that traditionally, historically, have been the types of impacts potentially that the conditions need to should address those potential impacts. That is the extent of what the recommendations are that I have. And again, as I made reference, it's certainly the prerogative of the planning commission and the town council to change those as both bodies deem appropriate.
May I ask Mr. Shaw for some clarification? It was stated in the last citizen input that was read by the clerk that a conditional use permit can only be applied for by the owner of the property. Could you comment on that?
Actually, I'll have to disagree with that. An applicant for a conditional use permit can be the owner or potentially a contract purchaser of the property.
Ms. J. Giles, would you like to respond to some?
Sure. So your local ordinance provides in part that, to Mr. Shaw's point, that with written permission, which through a development agreement and the contract, that the applicant has permission, but that the applicant or that an individual or a party could therefore be a proper applicant. And in this case, they are.
I have one more small point of clarification. Almost everybody who spoke commented about retail. Do the zoning ordinances for our town distinguish between retail and commercial?
Not to my knowledge, retail is just a component of one component of various commercial uses.
And I had a question about the completeness of the application. And also a question for Mr. Shaw. And also is, would you say that a conditional use permit is treated differently when it's an existing building versus a vacant lot? Can you speak on that?
In reference to certain conditions, yes, I would concur with that, Ms. Luna. If it's an existing building, and here's where I see that distinction maybe being most appropriate, and make an existing building is not going to really require the submittal of a site plan, because what it is a site plan is triggered in the town of Colonial Beach and other areas as well by adherence to the Chesapeake Bay Act. The Chesapeake Bay Act, of course, has provisions in it that says that a site plan or plan of development needs to be submitted when there's land disturbance in excess of 2,500 square feet in area. There's no disturbance of land in this application that would be anywhere close to that sort of de minimis level. So therefore, if it's below 2,500 square feet in area, the requirement that would trigger submission, a submittal of a site plan is not necessary because of the nature of that provision and the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area ordinance requirements.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Shaw? Okay,
Just for him.
or for staff, and then we, will have the planning commission will, motion, discuss it and vote, and then council will motion, discuss and vote. So if any other staff questions, so get into that. Okay. All right.
All right, so the question then is open for the commission. Do I have any, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
And can you repeat your motion and state it? And are you also including the staff recommendations or in your motion?
Yes, I also believe that, I move that we accept the CUP as is, as recommended by the commission, and go forward with this project. And thank Dodson.
And did I understand that you wanted to include the staff recommendations as well in your motion?
No, I'm just saying, I thought that they were very complete.
The question is, for the
Yes.
record, does your motion include an approval of the conditional use permit with the recommended conditions?
Yes.
Okay.
That is the move.
That's clear cut. Do I hear a second? And that could be from Mr. Howell or Mr. Ale as well?
I second it.
Okay, now it is open for discussion. And I would like to begin by saying that, I think it's a great opportunity for the town to utilize this property that's been vacant for years. And we simply don't know how long it would languish vacant. I had the opportunity to participate in a market analysis that was done for the town of Colonial Beach by the Virginia Commonwealth University, a graduate class. And they thoroughly evaluated the ability of our town to support retail and maybe a boutique type retail space. And they simply said that we're not in a position to really support retail at this time. So one of the things that market analysis did talk about was the fact that there is a need for restaurants. And so, we look forward to, for that in the future. But I think the overall impact of that report was that we're simply not in a position to, look at retail at this time. And I know there's a lot of disappointment in that. But we have every opportunity to move forward with the commercial mixed use. And that report also identified the fact that we do need residential short-term, spaces. And this is part of what Mr. Dodson is recommending or wanting to do in this. So I just thought I'd share that with you. Any further discussion?
I would just like to point out that this conditional use permit is specifically so to allow residential. It's for the mixed use of residential and commercial. So that's really what we're voting on. I fully support what the staff has recommended. And I really don't see how anyone would prefer to see empty buildings to continue. And how clear it is that people coming to this town will now see the buildings being utilized, and that will mean more tourism. It will mean more people attracted to start businesses here. So I fully support the motion.
I would like to start by saying, first, I fully support the motion. I think not only will it bring more tourism to the town, it will bring more full calendar work and employment to the town, and that the use of the downstairs space as mixed office use space, I think allows for folks that can telework, but don't necessarily have a good space at their house to do that. We'll have an area where they can do that, which will mean that we could potentially have people in the downtown area 12 months out of the year where we do not now. So that can help expand our traffic downtown. It'll improve for any restaurants or any other businesses that are in that area downtown throughout the winter months of the year. So first, I would like to say that I'm all for it. Secondly, I feel obliged to make a comment in reference to public comment in these forums. I am all about our citizens being able to speak. I'm all about them being able to have their appropriate amount of time. First of all, Mike, I'd like to apologize to you for cutting you short. I wasn't aware of your 5-minute limit, so my apologies for that. Secondly, I would like to express my thorough disdain for individuals in the community who continuously represent themselves as a group. Being the owner of 2 businesses does not make you a representative of a group. And if you use that to erroneously get yourself more time to speak than anyone else, shame on you.
Mr. Howell, do you have comments? Discussion?
No, I think that the clarification of the issue at hand being evaluation of the residential upstairs and the commercial use conforming downstairs is a succinct way to encapsulate what's before us, and that we should proceed.
Mr. L?
Yeah, I agree. I've had zero heartburn about this. I actually move this direction better than the previous direction. So I fully support this.
Well, with that, we're ready to vote on this. Ms. Maureen?
I vote yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Ale?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. The motion passes.
Okay, we're up. Up to bat. I think we can go right into discussion. Do I have a motion for the cup?
I make a motion that we approve the conditional use permit with one change to the staff recommendations. Instead of 8 to 10 p.m., the hours be 8 to 11 p.m.
Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
I'd like to, can I amend that motion and propose an additional?
The easiest course is a friendly amendment, if it would be accepted by Dr.
Would you accept a friendly amendment?
After I hear what it is.
If not, we can discuss and vote on that, and then we can discuss adding that, adding that amendment first.
Well, if Dr. Sullivan will accept the friendly amendment, then it's all still one motion.
Okay.
If not, it would be a separate.
Sure. Okay, so along with the 8 a.m. to 11 p.m., I would like to add 2 conditions. One is that the property must be developed to the historical designation credit standards. And the other is that any residential use designated would be restricted to the 2nd floor. Do I have a second?
Dr. Sullivan, do you accept those amendments to your motion? Or do you amend your motion in accordance with the request?
I'm not prepared to accept that as a friendly amendment because I'm not sure what that entails as far as the requirement that they would be developed to the historic designation standards.
Okay, so we'll do the 8 to 11 first.
So The motion on the floor, so you make a motion to amend the motion that's on the floor.
Because I didn't accept the friendly amendment.
Correct.
I make a motion to amend the motion.
Okay, so I do indeed make a motion to amend the motion to add those two restrictions. Do I have a second to that?
A second.
Okay, now we can discuss it. Thank you. Okay, so let me clarify some of that. First off, I agree that I think going to the 11 p.m. As requested is would be a good thing because number one, we have talked a lot and heard a lot about how this may change over time. And I think we'd like to give it that flexibility to do that. Second off, we have several events like Friday night art walks and Friday night cool nights and Friday night hot nights. And I don't know what else the downtown Friday night nightlife is going to end up being, but I'd like to support that. And also, if it is disruptive to the residential upstairs, then you shouldn't live there. So I grew up above a marina and a bar. You know, I guess it turned out okay. So I think, you know, that would be their choice to decide to lease or not, if the hours of operation were late. So that's on that point. The other 2 points that I added to it is that I think the reason for the deal, and I understand that development contract already states the historic designation tax credit standards, but this just reinforces that. It's also a really clear reason why we are moving forward with phase 2 is that these buildings are being adapted and reused with historical context. So it just underscores something that's already been promised, but putting it in further writing, just to make sure that everybody knows that it will stay. The outside of those buildings by those standards are going to have to be maintained to the standards within that program. And that is already a condition in the development agreement.
Can I speak to that point?
Sure.
Or you want to go ahead and move the second one?
Well, the third is just to make sure that the residential is indeed on the second floor. They can say it all day long, but let's just make sure they do it.
I would be in favor of that. My concern about the historic designation credits is that we don't have control of whether or not things are approved. That's done by.
I'm not saying that it has to be based on approval, but to the standards.
Can we ask the applicant to speak to that?
Sure.
Can we ask the applicant to speak to that as a condition?
Yes, so we're pursuing historic tax credits and the deal doesn't work without them, so we will certainly do that. So as long as those requirements aren't any more restrictive than DHR's requirements, which I doubt they would be. I don't know what you're saying, what those requirements are. As long as they're not more restrictive than DHR, we're going to do that anyway. I don't know how you would enforce that. It's you guys.
I'm just asking you to follow the DHR process.
We'll do it, yeah.
Yes,
You got it.
in conformance with the DHR process.
Yeah, we'll do that. He's okay with it. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's.
So with that input, I would support the amendment to the motion.
And I just want to be clear on any residential use designated for the second floor, obviously that would allow for entry, you know, an entry corridor and things like that to be on the first floor in order to provide for the residential use. So
The condition is already there that there be an outside entrance to the residential units.
I do not think it should have to be outside.
So you're looking to change that under the
It
staff
just says
recommendation?
a separate entrance. It does not say inside or outside.
That's correct. It's a separate, an outside or inside.
And it will have to remain that way if you're going to renovate the building to historic standards because they don't have exterior staircases.
Right.
Well, actually the chamber, I think. Is that one exterior on the side there? Yeah.
Interior.
But the one in, the other one, the bank building is an interior stair, so they're gonna have to keep that anyway. So I don't want to designate that as the outside.
Yeah, they're both interior staircases and we can't move them per DHR anymore, so.
So I just want to be clear that the residential use being on the second floor does not mean that the corridor or the entry to that would not be allowed.
that doesn't prohibit entry to the residence from the first floor.
Correct.
Okay.
Those are all the questions I have. Is there any other discussion? Yeah, Mr. Rhodes.
Yeah, just a couple things, for, I guess for Vivian maybe. Are you certifying that we're within all of our we're following all of our ordinances and everything is being met with that? With the legal aspects?
Based on what I've looked at so far, I see no violations with state code or your local ordinance.
Okay, and then just one other question, the residential upstairs, this is just for anybody, will that include Airbnb or will this just be people living up there, like apartments? What's the proposal? Does
I think the
anybody?
zoning would allow 12-month, full-time 12-month or short-term rentals from the zoning, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So
So
all
it
of
could
those
be
would be,
Airbnbs?
all of those would be for.
It could be
residential.
either, and I don't think we can be that, well, I don't know, we maybe could add a condition to be one or the other, but residential doesn't specify.
Okay. I know that's something the plan commission is addressing. The Airbnb thing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
I would call for a vote on the amendment.
Okay. I'll have my sheet. I'll call for a vote. Ms. Clement?
Vote aye.
Mr. Moncur? Ms. Robertson? Aye. Mr. Gabe?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Ms. Sullivan?
Aye.
A vote on. Okay, motion passes.
Mayor, yes, that was for the amendment.
That was for the amendment. Now we have to vote on the amended
Well, that's
motion.
good, because I wanted to keep discussing it. Do I have a motion?
Motion's on the floor, it has been amended.
Okay, so we're just voting now for final. Should it be restated? You need it restated?
The motion, for the record, is to approve the conditional use permit, amending the hours from, it was 7 a.m. I think.
8
8 a.m., I'm sorry, to 11 p.m. And then adding the, and I didn't write this down, I wasn't fast enough, Mayor Shea, to write down the, your amendments, your proposed amendments that were approved. So adding also the three, I think it was 3 amendments that you requested to the conditions, or I'm sorry, the additions to the conditions. Okay.
Yeah, and the conditions are to be developed in accordance with DHR historical designation standards. And that any residential use does be designated only to the second floor minus any entry or egress. Okay. I'll go this way this time. Dr. Sullivan,
Is there any discussion on the amended motion?
we've already voted on it. Is there more discussion?
No, we voted on the amendment, and now there's an amended motion on the floor, and there should be an opportunity for discussion if anybody wants to on the amended motion before we vote.
Dr. Sullivan,
Aye.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Avery,
Aye.
Ms. Robertson. Aye. Mr. Moncur.
Aye.
Ms. Clement.
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye. Any questions, Vivian, before I do a motion for adjournment? Okay, I think the planning commission goes first. Oh, we're adjourning first.
The planning commission can adjourn.
Thank you. Okay, town council, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah. Thank you.